Welcome to the Greater Essex County District School Board's presentation on the Individual Education Plan, the role of the secondary teacher. Recently, across the province, there have been an increased number of human rights complaints, civil lawsuits, and calls to the Ombudsman to act as a third party in complaints where parents and students feel IEPs are not being implemented in the classroom. It's important for each educator to be aware of their responsibilities in the IEP process to ensure that each of our students are receiving the supports they are entitled to in the IEP. The Ministry of Education's Curriculum Resource Guide, Learning for All, tells us that there are 3 practices that every effective classroom should have. They are universal design for learning, differentiated instruction, and tiered interventions. Refer to the Board's strategic wheel for links to additional strategies for universal design for learning and for differentiated instruction. Tier 1 is where the process begins. These strategies will be successful for 80% of students. Tier 2 is flexible, needs-based, small group instruction. These strategies will be successful for 15 to 20% of students. Tier 3 is intensive, individualized, and explicit instruction. This will be the case for 5% of your students. These are your high school students who have been identified through the IPRC process and have individual education plans. Following a psychological assessment, board or private, the information from the assessment is used to determine if there is evidence to support an identification as indicated by the Ministry of Education. At this time, the principal and/or parent can call an IPRC meeting. The IPRC meeting formally determines the I, the identification or exceptionality, and the P, the placement. The Ministry newsletter, Supporting the Ontario Leadership Strategy, Principals Want to Know, offers a concise description of the IPRC and IEP process. This document, issue number 12, from February 2012, is available on the Ontario Ministry of Education website for your further review. The Ministry of Education created an IEP resource guide in 2004. The link is also available on the Ministry of Education website. This resource guide contains step-by-step details required when writing an IEP, and it provides definitions and examples for all areas of the IEP. Please be advised that at the time of this recording, an updated IEP resource guide is anticipated from the Ministry of Education. Please refer to the Ministry of Education website for the availability of this new resource. Regulation 181/98 requires that all students that are identified through the IPRC process have an Individual Education Plan, or IEP. This IEP may include accommodations, modifications, and/or alternative expectations. An IEP is developed for each student who has been identified as exceptional through the IPRC process. Following the IPRC meeting, an IEP is developed within 30 school days of the student's identification and placement date and is a legal requirement for the exceptional student. It also denotes strengths, needs, assessment information, accommodations, modifications, and/or alternative expectations. An IEP is a working document and can be updated and modified as necessary. Teachers are responsible to develop and implement the IEP under the direction of the principal. It is not optional. The IEP is a student's right. Teachers are responsible and accountable for implementing the IEP. As mentioned in the previous slide, once a student has been formally identified through the IPRC, they must have an IEP. An IEP may also be developed for a student not formally identified, but who is deemed by the board to require special education services. These types of IEPs are called non-identified IEPs, and they're created only after consultation with the school administration and the education coordinator. There are 5 scenarios in which a non-identified IEP is typically created. First, a non-identified IEP may be created if a recommendation has been made to psychological services for a consult and psychological services has signed off on a Form 4 for testing. Secondly, non-identified IEPs may also be created for SEA claims, which may include FM systems or occupational and physiotherapy claims. Thirdly, a student comes to us from a coterminous board where they had an IEP. It's important to confirm that data in the OSR supports the IEP and that we begin the process to formally having them assessed through our psychological services. Fourth, a student from within our own board who has a non-identified IEP was on a list to be assessed but due to transiency has never been formally identified. Note that these students should continue the process of being formally assessed within our system. Finally, if a student is receiving accommodations as part of their daily learning, a non-identified IEP may be created to outline the supports required for provincial assessment in addition to those required daily. This may include students transitioning from elementary school, where they were receiving LST support and continue to require that support. The IEP is a working document that identifies specific accommodated or modified expectations for a student based on their individual strengths and needs. It's also an accountability tool for administration, teachers, and educational support staff who have responsibilities under the plan for helping the student meet the stated goals and learning expectations as the student progresses through the Ontario curriculum. An IEP contains information that is relevant and necessary for the individual student to be successful for the current academic year. This information is included in a variety of mandatory areas, such as specific accommodations for the individual student's learning profile, a transition plan that is also individualized and based on the need of the student, a communication log where communication between home and school is documented throughout the academic year when conversation about the student's IEP occurs, and modified expectations that are assessed and reported on the ministry report card and teaching strategies necessary for the individual student to reach the stated expectations. The IEP development team may include a variety of people. It may include the classroom teacher or teachers, the LST, school staff such as the behavioral specialist or educational support staff, other professionals that work within our schools to support student learning such as the speech and language pathologist, social worker, and educational coordinator may also consult in the development of the IEP. Consultation with parents is also an important part of developing an IEP. This team may change based on the individual needs of the student. What is the responsibility of the classroom teacher? It's their responsibility to develop strategies and assessment methods that support the learning needs of their students. They are the key curriculum expert on how the IEP can be developed to help the student progress. The classroom teacher collaborates with the in-school team in the IEP process as necessary. It's important to note that our students with IEPs should remain in the classroom as much as possible. Teachers are encouraged to provide accommodations in the classroom. The classroom teacher is the curriculum expert in their subject area, which makes them the best person to provide the support in that subject. If students do need to access the LST, it should be after they've received the lesson in the classroom, so that they have all the tools and information necessary to continue with their learning. Teachers are also responsible for maintaining ongoing communication with parents and school staff, and they record any communication with the parent on the IEP. What is the responsibility of the principal? The principal establishes the in-school team, ensures that the IEPs are completed within 30 school days, and confirms that the IEPs are implemented, evaluated, and updated at least once per reporting period. It's important to note that IEPs are only required to be signed in September. Parents are not signing that they are in agreement with the IEP, but rather that they have received the IEP and that they've had the opportunity to consult in the development of the IEP. When following an effective IEP, students will start to see success and gains in their learning. So when can we discontinue the IEP? No teacher should choose to discontinue the IEP alone. It should not be discontinued without consulting with the IEP team. Further assessment needs to be conducted. Parents, school staff, and other professionals must be consulted. Once all of this information is available, then the IEP team will decide if there is a need to continue with the modifications or accommodations. By law, every IPRC student must have an IEP. When developing an IEP for a student, a decision will need to be made if curriculum will be accommodated or modified in each academic area. What's the difference between these two terms? An accommodation assists the student in achieving the grade level expectations. For example, this could mean extended time, use of a scribe, handouts of notes, etc. In the secondary setting, a modification increases or decreases the number or complexity of grade level curriculum expectations. Accommodations are strategies, supports, and/or services that help students to access the curriculum and demonstrate learning. Accommodations may be for instruction, environment, and/or assessment. They should be unique to the individual student, specific and minimal in number. More does not mean better. An accommodation assists the student in achieving the grade level expectations, but does not impact the integrity of the subject or course. The student will still meet the curriculum requirements. Accommodations are differentiated or alternative approaches to receiving information, assignment completion, and/or evaluation. They provide equal access to learning opportunities for students with disabilities by leveling the playing field. Accommodations are provided in an attempt to minimize or eliminate disadvantages which occur due to disability-related factors. Schools have a duty to accommodate in order to comply with the Human Rights Code. The Education for All ministry document defines modified curriculum as subjects and courses from the Ontario curriculum in which the student requires modified expectations or expectations that differ in some way from the regular grade expectations. Simply put, accommodations are a change to how we teach and assess, and modifications are changes to what we teach and assess. Accommodations refer to the teaching strategies, assessment and evaluation strategies, supports and/or services that are required for a student to access the curriculum and demonstrate learning. Modifications refer to changes made to the content of the learning expectations. Accommodations do not alter the provincial learning expectations for the grade or level of the curriculum. Modifications alter the grade level learning expectations from the provincial curriculum. Both accommodations and modifications are recorded on the IEP. However, accommodations can also be made to support modifications. Accommodations remove or lessen the barriers a student faces to provide opportunities for success. Modifications change the outcomes or what an individual is expected to learn. There is a change to the number and/or complexity of the grade level learning expectations. Accommodations are allowed for EQAO testing in limited ways, such as adjustments to the environment, time allowed, format of the test, or format of responses. Modifications are not allowed for EQAO testing. Accommodations may be a change to a classroom environment or delivery method that permits an individual to participate in the classroom process and the task. Modifications are significant changes related to the specific content, level of skills, or number of skills required by the program. Accommodations support ministry expectations, while modifications are derived from ministry expectations. Reduction in the number of expectations can be both an accommodation and a modification, depending on exactly what is being reduced. Here's an example of a reduction of questions that would be considered an accommodation. The class is assigned 6 questions that target the same skill. For example, describing Canada's major imports and exports. The accommodated student may only be asked to complete 3. Now, here is an example of a reduction of questions that would be considered a modification. The class is assigned 3 questions, targeting a lower level expectation. For example, describing Canada's major imports and exports, and 3 targeting a higher level expectation. For example, assessing some of the environmental, economic, social, and political implications of Canada's current export and import patterns. The student who is modified might only be asked to complete the questions targeting the lower level expectation, or they may be asked to complete both sets of questions, but might only be assessed on those targeting the lower level expectation. Please refer to the 2 handouts provided. First is a sample accommodations checklist. This checklist gives many suggestions on accommodations that you can provide. Remember, providing accommodations is a requirement for a student on an IEP, but it is a great way to support all students in your classroom. Second is the I Try To handout. Take this survey for your own look at how well you provide accommodations in the classroom. Consider, what are you great at? Where can you improve? Universal Design for Instruction, or UDI, is an approach to teaching which considers the diversity of all students when designing and delivering instruction. This proactive design benefits a broad range of students, including students with disabilities. Teachers identify and eliminate barriers and build flexibility, options, and choices into their course plans and instructional strategies while maintaining academic rigor. This approach maximizes learning opportunities for all students while minimizing the need for special accommodations. Here are some common examples of the application of UDI. Class climate. Adopting practices that reflect high values with respect to both inclusiveness and diversity. Teachers invite students to meet with them to make known any individual learning needs. Delivery methods. Presenting information through a variety of methods such as lectures, group discussions, hands-on activities, projects, case studies, and internet-based interactions, just to name a few. Learning methods. Providing class information in alternative formats such as electronic print materials, online PowerPoint notes, advanced outlines, etc. Interaction. Encouraging different ways for students to interact with each other, such as in-class questions, class discussions, group work, etc. Feedback. Effective prompting during activities in order to guide student learning. Providing frequent feedback to students about their progress to help correct errors and misconceptions. Evaluation. Providing frequent, flexible opportunities to demonstrate knowledge, such as multifaceted tests, papers, group work, demonstrations, presentations, portfolios, etc. Physical effort and access. Ensuring that classrooms, labs, and fieldwork are accessible to individuals with a wide range of physical abilities. Self-advocacy. Research shows that highly successful adults with learning difficulties have identified the ability to self-advocate as an important factor contributing to success both in post-secondary education and in the workplace. It becomes increasingly important as students enter high school that they're able to express their needs in a positive way. They'll require support and guidance to develop these skills to increase their independence as learners. 3 steps for teaching self-advocacy. First, help the students know themselves as learners. Talk with students about their strengths and needs and how they can express them to others. Help students understand what type of learner they are. Do they require visuals? Is it better for them to hear the information? Empathize with their difficulties. Focus on finding solutions. Model the vocabulary needed to describe their strengths and needs. Second, involve students in identifying their goals. Students' input and involvement should increase as they proceed through the grades. Involving students in selecting and evaluating assistive technology and strategies. Provide opportunities for making plans and choices. Finally, teach students ways in which to communicate their needs appropriately. Model and teach appropriate self-advocacy skills. Self-advocacy skills need to be demonstrated. Help students to prepare for meetings, conversations with teachers, or other situations in which they may be involved in planning their educational future. Start with small goals, such as asking a teacher for an accommodation, and gradually increase student responsibility as they gain experience with advocating for themselves. Self-advocacy in the Greater Essex County District School Board. As a system, we're recognizing more and more the importance of teaching students to self-advocate. For example, at one of our high schools, students are given 4 copies of their own IEP at the beginning of each semester and are asked to share them with their teachers. This is a great way to help students prepare for post-secondary. Once they're at university or college, it's their responsibility to speak to their professors about their accommodations and make arrangements to receive them. The IEP. Our students are entitled to it, and it's their right. It's our responsibility to ensure they're getting the accommodations and modifications outlined as mandated by the Ministry of Education.